Kirk Cameron!
I realize this is my second video about Kirk Cameron's family in like a hot minute, but that's all this channel is gonna be from now on. Sorry, Bible series. I guess this is my life now. This is my sweater for life. Anyway, in a desperate plea for attention and a pathetic attempt to market his new children's book, Christian evangelist and former TV star and current washed-up TV star Kirk Cameron claims public libraries are censoring him even while welcoming drag queens and hosting LGBTQ-friendly events. Cameron's publishers at Brave Books told the Fox propaganda outlet that they reached out to 50 libraries to see if they would sponsor events in which Cameron would read his book to kids. They presumably wanted the libraries to advertise the events on their websites and market the readings just as they do other children's events. And naturally, many of them said no. Some were polite about it, saying we will pass. Others were more blunt, saying our messaging does not align. And that was enough for Fox to run with a headline suggesting some kind of hypocrisy. Kirk Cameron is denied Story Hour slot by public libraries for his new faith-based kids book. But while he was denied, that doesn't mean he was censored. Here's the thing. Cameron's new book, As You Grow, is a religious book that suggests you need God to be moral.
It's called As You Grow, helping kids to develop moral character and the fruits of the Spirit through the various seasons of life.
He's lying to kids, but with small words. That's the requirement to write a Christian kids book. I know most of you know this, but Cameron himself is an anti-LGBTQ creationist who uses his platforms to push bigotry and misinformation. Public libraries are under no obligation to use their resources to promote people or books that send messages contrary to their values, or books that have no value. If I offered to read the dictionary to kids, they would say no to me too, because it's a waste of time. This is my sweater for life. Having a drag queen read a story about inclusion and acceptance? Of course, that's not a problem. Why would it be? That story has value. But having a hate-filled evangelist read a book that suggests Jews and atheists are going to be tortured for eternity is a problem. Drag queens, by the way, couldn't get away with reading his book either.
On Twitter, one user wrote, "Drag queens are not reading books to children about how to be drag queens. They're reading about green eggs and ham and Very Hungry Caterpillar. Kirk Cameron would be reading a book about only accepting one way to live, and being different is wrong."
But here's the main reason Kirk Cameron's attempt at suggesting this is censorship fails. Some of those same libraries that did not want to promote his events had no problem whatsoever allowing Cameron to reserve meeting space and host his own reading. That's what plenty of people do. At my local library, large meeting spaces and smaller conference rooms are available for anybody with a library card to rent for a reasonable fee, while smaller study rooms are free for anyone with a library card. Cameron could have taken that option. He could have paid for space at various libraries, marketed the events himself, and read his book to whatever families thought that would be a fun gathering. He didn't do that because he doesn't actually care about reading this book to kids. There's no victimhood in that. The Fox article even noted that libraries offered that option to Cameron. One of them wrote back to his publishers saying they could fill out a form to reserve space even if the library itself wasn't putting on the program. They chose not to do that because it didn't fit the narrative they were trying to sell to their right-wing audience. Libraries have no legal mandate to to use staff time to do promotional work on an author's behalf. They do this sort of thing all the time, by the way. Suppose a new author wants a library to promote his upcoming reading, but there's no indication the book is popular, or that people in the community would attend the event, or the author has no connection to the community. The library can say no. It takes a lot of staff time to run any kind of program, and that's money. And if an event isn't interesting or doesn't align with the library's mission, they can just politely refuse to participate. That's not illegal. That's literally how libraries work. They can make their public spaces available to everyone who wants to rent them and who agree to the general guidelines, but they do not have to greenlight every single programming request that comes into the system. That includes requests from the Crocoduck guy.
This is called the Crocoduck.
The Fox piece attempts to create this false dichotomy between the rejection of Cameron's Bible-based kids book and the acceptance of drag queen story hours and safe spaces for LGBTQ teens and a teen queer book club and legal aid clinics for trans people who need help filling out paperwork regarding their identity. But those are not polar opposites. Cameron wants to tell kids that only Christians have a moral foundation. Those other events help marginalized people feel welcome and accepted. They are public services. And the LGBTQ people are not sitting around trashing Christians. In fact, some of them may be Christians themselves. But we know damn well what Kirk Cameron and his colleagues say about the other side.
Kirk Cameron is a raging homophobe.
Marriage was defined by God a long time ago. Marriage is almost as old as dirt, and it was defined in the garden between Adam and Eve, one man, one woman, for life.
Kirk claimed that homosexuality is detrimental and ultimately destructive to the foundations of civilization.
The entire Fox article basically repeats this idea several times over. Library A said they would not promote Cameron's event, but Library A also helps gay and trans kids. Can you believe it? Yeah, I can. Furthermore, I would point out that we don't know what the pitch was like to these libraries. Cameron had far more to gain, publicity-wise, by getting rejected than by having any of the libraries say yes. So it would be useful to know what his people claimed he was trying to do. The fact that Cameron mentions 50 libraries, while the Fox piece only references like 5 of them, and mostly quotes low-level staffers, suggests there's no real story here at all. But with the conservative propaganda network taking the bait, Cameron's publishers ran with their lie. The head of Brave Books said libraries have become, quote, indoctrination centers that refuse to allow biblical wisdom to be taught to our children. Those same indoctrination centers have no shortage of Christian books and Bibles on their shelves. Apparently, there's no way to teach kids anything unless a former child star with a banana in his hand is reading his book to them.
Behold, the atheist's nightmare.
Trent Talbot of Brave Books doesn't give a damn about the facts. He just wants to sell his product. And he knows the sort of Christians who might buy Kirk Cameron's book are too dumb to recognize how bad his argument is. So he's spreading a lie that conservative Christians love telling themselves. These libraries are not refusing to allow biblical wisdom to be taught to our children. They're saying no to promoting the events themselves, while giving Cameron ample opportunities to rent their space to do whatever the hell he wants. Even more pathetic is how Brave Books claimed Kirk Cameron should fit in with one library's mission to promote racial equity and diversity because basically white is a color and Christianity is a religion. When one library wrote back to them about a strategic plan to bring in diverse authors and people of color, the response was that Cameron's book contributed to diversity. Which is like saying a conference where all the speakers are white men contributes to diversity because white is on the color spectrum and men are people too. The people who think the racial rainbow goes from white to off-white believe racial equity means libraries have to platform Kirk Cameron. It's just desperation for a guy whose book isn't good enough to get attention any other way. The irony is that if Cameron's book meets their usual criteria, these libraries would probably have no problem making it available on their shelves for anyone who wants to check it out, just as they do with all other books, no matter the content. Instead of pointing that out, however, the Fox piece by Maureen Mackey spends several paragraphs explaining that local governments help fund libraries, giving right-wing extremists more fake fuel to whine about indoctrination and persecution. Kirk Cameron isn't going to take the moral high road and explain why that narrative is wrong. Maybe he should read his own book. Or maybe morality is just something the rest of us are good at. The ones who don't share his religion.
We are child celebrities opposing Kirk Cameron.
We're pledging to raise awareness about a serious threat to our civil rights.
Kirk Cameron's stupid opinions.